Have you been told that good breath support means holding your ribs open? Maybe. Are you confused about how to do that? Totally. All right, well, then this episode of Singing Tips with LJD Studios is for you. We are talking about breath support, but specifically how to support with your rib cage. But as always, before we get into it, please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and if you haven't already, download my free guide, The 3-Tiered Approach to Becoming a Better Singer, linked in the description. Additionally, if you do find that you're getting valuable content on this channel and would like some direct and customized feedback from yours truly, please do check out my membership option. For as little as $29 a month, you can submit a video of yourself singing. I will respond with a video with customized exercises just for you. You will get unlimited access to all of my favorite vocal exercises. You can join a live group monthly masterclass. You can get discounts on private lessons. It's a lot of bang for your buck, so please check it out. All right, breath support, specifically your rib cage. Why is it so difficult? Holding your ribs open when you're singing is not bad advice. If you haven't seen any of my other videos on breath support, the one thing to keep in mind is we want a balance between muscles that are driving airflow up to the space of the vocal cords and muscles that are actually resisting that airflow. So make sure to check out some of those other videos. But if you are focused on holding your ribs open, that means the muscles of your rib cage are doing the job of resisting. Okay, why, how, what? Let's talk about what your ribs just do in normal breathing patterns. Let's get into the anatomy just a little bit because I think it's helpful to have a picture. So picture your rib cage. All right, let's kind of picture the whole thing. So on the front, you've got your sternum, right? And your ribs attached at the front to the sternum. And then they sort of span out like wings, right? And come all the way around to the back and attach at the back to your spine. You have muscles in between your rib cage, each rib actually. You have the internal intercostal muscles and the external intercostal muscles. These are the muscles that are responsible for either pulling your ribs apart when we breathe in or bringing your ribs together when we breathe out. So just picture that for a moment. Every time you breathe in, the ribs do like this. Every time you breathe out, the ribs do like this. Okay? What happens is your lungs are actually attached to your ribs. So every time your ribs move out, the lungs go out and air comes in. Right? Every time the ribs squeeze together, the lungs compress and air goes out. Okay? So just kind of wrap your head around that picture of normal breathing patterns. Ribs expand, that means the lungs are expanding. If the lungs are expanding, that means air is going in, right? If the ribs compress, that means the lungs are compressing. If the lungs compress, that means that air is going out. So if you are trying to hold your ribs open, you are effectively trying to hold your lungs open while you're exhaling. That sounds challenging, doesn't it? How am I supposed to hold my lungs open and exhale at the same time? It is very challenging. That's what makes this concept of breath support sort of difficult for singing, because your body, and I've said this before, but your body does not care about singing. And it certainly doesn't care about you making a beautiful sound. Your body cares about breathing, right? And when we are singing, we are not using the same breathing patterns that we would for the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. The goal is just a little bit different. I mean, please don't pass out, right? Like you're still getting enough oxygen and carbon dioxide and all of that, but it's not at the rate of just normal resting breathing patterns, okay? It's different. So effectively, when we are singing and we are holding the ribs open, we are using the muscles of the inhalation, right? The muscles that pull the ribs apart. We're asking them to stay engaged while we exhale. I'll just say that again. You are asking your inhale muscles to work while you exhale. They are not used to doing that. That's why it's very difficult. That's why your brain is probably breaking while you're trying to learn how to do this, because those muscles are like, we out on the exhale. This is not our job, right? And all of a sudden you're asking them to still participate while you're breathing out. So that's why it's so challenging. Okay, so that kind of gives you a picture, right, of how your rib cage influences your breathing patterns in general. Again, expand as you breathe in, contract as you breathe out, right? When we sing, we are sort of flipping that on its head, where yes, we're still going to expand the ribs as we breathe in, but then we're going to try to keep them expanded as we breathe out to resist the rate at which we supply air to the vocal cords, okay? So let's say you want to go about this method. And I want to put this little caveat, because in the beginning I was like, maybe with the ribs. I'm being kind of snarky. Like I think this is a great way to support the sound. It's one of the primary ways that a lot of people love to use the muscles of the respiratory system for breathing, for singing. It's a wonderful way to go about breath support. I don't subscribe to a one size fits all kind of breathing for singing. So if the ribcage thing is just not working for you, there are other ways to do it. So see my other videos on what breath support is and how to do it, because you don't have to resist with the intercostals. You could, and that's the muscles between the ribs. You could also resist with the upper abdomen, the solar plexus area. There's lots of ways to sort of push back against the airflow. It doesn't have to be at the rib cage, but that's what we're talking about today. So I'm going to teach you how to do it with your rib cage in the event that that's the way you are choosing to go about supporting the air and the sound for singing. That was a big disclaimer. Okay, so maybe the way you've already seen and been taught is to just like literally put your hands on your ribs, right? And I would say try to get a thumb as far back as your shoulders will allow, because remember, the bulk of your rib cage is actually on your back. It's not just the side, right? There's a little here on the front. You can sort of, depending on your body type, you might be able to sort of like feel the front of the ribs come down here and then around to the back, right? But try to get a thumb on your back as much as possible so you can feel the bulk of your rib cage. And then just breathe in. See if you can sort of feel the ribs lift and expand, and then breathe out. Feel them drop and hug back in toward the midline, right? And just feel that. It's your normal breathing patterns. You breathe in, the ribs expand. You breathe out, the ribs squeeze together, right? So the external and internal intercostals are working as you breathe in. One contracts, one relaxes, doesn't matter which, and you breathe out. One contracts and one relaxes, okay? So get accustomed to that. Now, when we're singing, again, we're trying to keep the ribs open, which is not what they normally do when we are breathing. So you're going to breathe in, ribs expand. You're going to hiss. Squeeze your belly in, squeeze your belly in, squeeze your belly in so that you're contracting something still. Hold your ribs open, hold your ribs open, hold your ribs open. Okay, so try that a couple times. Breathe in, the belly expands, the ribs expand. You breathe out, squeeze the belly, think navel to spine, hold the ribs open. All right, so that's one way to go about it. That's generally the primary way that most teachers teach this idea. So I'm kind of assuming if you're watching this video, maybe you've tried that. Maybe that's familiar to you, and maybe that's not working for you. So I'm going to go about it a little bit different way. This is fine. This is great. I'm just like choked on my lips. This is great. But again, the bulk of your rib cage is on your back, not on your side. And so if you're struggling, I think that's probably why, because you're probably focusing on the sides of your ribs. And maybe where you need to be focusing is on the back of your ribs. So this is going to sound a little weird, but just hear me out. Find your sternum, the base of it in particular, and breathe in and breathe out. What you will likely feel is your sternum rise a little as you breathe in and fall as you breathe out. The next time you breathe out, I almost want you to see if you can suck your sternum in, almost like you would like suck your belly in, like suck it in. Actually, you know what? I lied. Do it on the breath in. Breathe in and see if you can kind of suck your sternum in. Now, there's a difference between sort of sucking the sternum in and just rounding your spine, okay? This one is not using any muscles on the front of my chest. All I'm doing is rounding my spine and slumping, right? Versus this, I'm breathing in. I'm sort of sucking my sternum in. And as I do that, I feel the back of my ribs pop open. So what you might see on your screen here is what looks like me rounding through my spine. I am not. What I am feeling is my ribs popping open. So that's what you're seeing. I'm not rounding my spine. The back of my ribs are pushing back, right? This is nuanced. It does take a lot of proprioception, or like that mind-body connection, right? This is a very specific thing I'm asking of suck your sternum in, push the back of your ribs out. In some ways, it might be more difficult than this first one of hissing and holding your ribs open. But I think it gets to the root of what needs to occur in singing, which is the muscles between the ribs need to stay engaged. The intercostals need to stay engaged. Where is the bulk of that muscle mass? On your back, not on your sides. It's here too, but the bulk of it is on the back. And so this is one way to help you kind of connect with that. Okay. So now what you would do is when you're singing, but I would suggest especially doing it on a leap, like when you go from a lower note to a higher note, to think about sternum in, ribs out. So I go, ooh. That felt pretty good because I'm really supporting it with the ribs now. And the other thing about this, when I do it this way, it's a very different feeling than I'm trying so hard to hold my ribs open, where you might start to feel like you're really stuck and the sound gets really like compressed or pushed or maybe flat or maybe sharp. I find that happens a lot with people who are really just trying so hard to push their rib cage open. This feels a lot more fluid. It feels a lot softer, frankly. It feels I don't feel like I'm trying to just like muscle through it or like grip through it. It feels buoyant, okay? And so that's how I know I'm hitting this right balance of like, yeah, I still need to move some air, but resist against it. That's what the rib cage is doing. So again, as I go to that higher note, I'm just letting my sternum kind of like suck into the midline of my body. As I do that, the back of the ribs sort of pop open. That feels so free, so open, so easy versus that felt okay, but it's not the same. That feels kind of gripped when I'm trying to like my ribs out. So if you've been practicing this way of like hold the ribs out, and it feels really like stuck and rigid, that would be another reason to go about doing it this way, of thinking sort of just umbrella the back of the ribs open rather than trying to like muscle the ribs open. Okay, so I tote this whole like, let's get really like black and white about things. And hopefully this makes sense. Hopefully it has been explained in a way that you can understand. It is not as obvious as this way, right? But there's a lot in singing that is super, super nuanced. So I hope that this offers you an alternative to the typical approach to supporting with your rib cage. Use the back of your rib cage and do it in a way that is really buoyant and soft rather than a way that is gripped and over muscled. Let me know if you guys have questions. This is, I think, probably a different way than I've ever seen anyone explain it ever. I don't want to like toot my own horn, but I'm pretty sure I've never heard anyone explain it this way. So super curious about feedback. If it makes sense to you, if it doesn't, please let me know. Happy singing.